What's up, brother?
What's up, man? How are you?
I'm good, man. Your beard looks it's shining in this sunlight right now. It looks fantastic.
Oh, it's the camera quality. I think it helps it out. Adds a couple inches, I think.
The high def is crazy.
Oh, yeah, the 4K just does it justice, man. I think,
It really does it feels like when you finally like upgrade your TV for the first time and you're just like I'm seeing details I haven't seen ever. It's crazy.
Do you remember the first time you used like a 1080p HD or when there was like those it was like channel 10-3-1 and it was like you had to get there to get the HD.
Yeah.
If not, it was just like it didn't even fit the screen. It was
Like
like
good luck,
analog.
buddy.
Yeah.
Dude, I remember the transition from like even like video games when you're plugging in like an N64 and you got like these like the red plug, the yellow plug, the white plug, and like I think that was analog, right? And like that's what you did, man. Now it's like I can't like holy fuck, I can't even process like the graphics right now.
Those are called RCA jacks.
Wow. See? And I grew up during those times too. Like I was a VHS kid.
Oh yeah, I used to take my Sega Dreamcast. Um, we took our Sega Genesis places too, my brother and I. Um, but yeah, man, and no matter where we traveled, like I always kind of took it. It was a safety net for me, I think, socially.
Oh,
I really
yes.
I love to game, but like I think it was a way, looking back now, I think it was just a way for me to have like some downtime, guaranteed downtime to myself, and
Mm-hmm.
it allowed me to get away from people and um kind of go just yeah, just have time for myself, which I
Yeah,
feel like
yeah.
when you're young, you're just being pulled in so many different directions because
Yeah.
you're there to see people and you're there to be social, you're there to visit because you haven't seen them in a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and there's only so much I can do of that,
Yeah.
you know.
Do you
Um,
find yourself do you find yourself because I was that kid too. I've always been like an extrovert introvert kind of guy, but I was a video game kid like 1000%. I still play video games now. Like do you find yourself like more socially adept now? Like do you find yourself able like to break out of that like mold where you can be have the energy to socialize more, or do you still feel like you need to monitor your social battery and you can do it in more doses now, but you still need that downtime?
yeah, I think it's like I'm working on some endurance-based goals right now, and I think it's a lot like that.
Mm,
I think it's a lot like a VO2 max. It's sort of the representation of the work you've done most, over the past X amount of months or years or whatever.
mm,
Because you don't get to a certain point unless you've done the work to get there.
right.
And so socially, yes, I'm quite sensory sensitive to sound and especially sound, but pretty light sensitive, but sound is my big one.
Mm,
Um, and it's just something I've been like that my whole life, and I didn't really realize that was a thing that like really bothered me. That was I didn't know it was different that
yeah.
it bothered me. I just thought like, oh, how are you not annoyed by this, and how are you not overwhelmed that it's so loud in here? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and I just as I've gotten older, I've just learned how to cope with it. I didn't
Yeah.
have there wasn't much accommodation to it when I was young, nor do I think there otherwise should have been. It's just sort of what you live with, right? Everyone has their things and
Yeah.
everyone's sensitive to different things. And um no, so I've definitely gotten better at it. And I would say now I'm certainly able to I'm fine. You
Yeah.
know, I'll run out of batteries pretty
Yeah.
quick, depending on the situation and how many people are around.
Mm-hmm.
But like the conference was big. Like the conference is big for me because
Yeah.
that's a lot of people I don't know and I've never met,
Mm-hmm.
and also I'm aware, like I've met people that I look up to before and how excited I was and just how much that one conversation meant to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that isn't lost on me when that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so it's it's just I want to be there, and just give you all. And you met me out. He's like, my
Yeah.
energy isn't abundant. I
Yeah.
don't lead with a ton of excitement and energy, but that's just me. That's
Right.
just me existing in life. Like that's just me.
Right.
Um, but that new social interchange, that new
Yeah.
social interaction for me, it does take a lot of energy for me and
Yeah.
quite draining. So, I went back every night. Like, that's why you didn't see me at night,
Hmm.
like do the social things at night. Cause like I needed all of that time to
Hmm.
recharge socially so I could be there the next day,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
So
Well, I think I guess the best way to define your approach is like you're intentional with your engine energy, right? Which is, I think
gotta
that,
be.
yeah, yeah, you gotta be. And I get it, dude. I think for me it was I found out I was more on the introverted side. I think probably like once I got to college, and then you have these like people are like, let's go to the club, and then I go to the club, I'm like, this is my nightmare. I'm just
Yeah.
like, this is like the worst place I could ever be.
Yeah. I could count my club experiences on one hand.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
As
Over
we should.
as honestly, probably that's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Dude, I'm all for that. Because I really like hearing sort of like how you grew up, and I guess we'll get to that in a bit. Why don't you introduce your stoic intentional self to the audience, and who you are, what you do, all that.
Yeah. So I'm a personal trainer, at face value. I'm a fitness writer as well. So I've spent my entire adult life essentially either studying, performing, or teaching weight training, um, and anatomy, physiology, those type of topics.
Mm-hmm.
I've coached since I've been a personal trainer and coached people since 2013, which I was, just for age reference, I was 19 when I started. Um, I also started competing at that time as well in bodybuilding
Mm-hmm.
and physique bodybuilding, which small. There's definitely a difference there.
A little
Um,
emphasis on the like classic physique we're talking. So are you like
no, just men's physique.
oh, okay, okay.
Yeah. Um, and I had a professional career in that, so I turned pro in the
Wow.
IFBB in 2014. So it was 9 months after I started competing.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a professional career that lasted a few years there. I competed a few times in
Yeah.
in the IFBB. Um, and yeah, I've coached people through whether it's everyday gym goers to people on the Olympia stage to retired athletes, professional
Mm-hmm.
athletes, WWE wrestlers. It's kind of just the
That's
gambit,
cool.
and
Yeah.
I found myself in really random, weird situations with, it just getting to coach so many different people. And
Yeah.
I've also traveled around and educated personal trainers on topics of program design, nutrition, anatomy, physiology. And so, that's sort of my career up to this point. And then in 2021, I authored a book called Science of Strength Training, and
Mm-hmm.
that's probably the biggest contribution to the space I think I've had
Yes.
up to this point.
An amazing, amazing book.
Thank
Everybody
you.
should get it. I think it's especially for me. I went to the University of Rhode Island. I had these anatomy courses. I had these physiology courses, right? But I think I wish they had your book when I was in school because it really does make things so simple and to the point, and
Yeah.
like the illustrations alone are like worth the purchase, right? Let alone your words in the book.
It's an adult picture book, man. And that that
Yes.
was kind of the that was kind of the point. It's a visual encyclopedia to strength training, and it is meant to be very visual. And we
Yeah.
spent the majority, I spent 18 months, I think, in total with that project. And I would say there was probably a dedicated 6 month time period just to the illustration,
Mm.
component of that, right? Getting all the reference images. My wife took all those are all reference images based off of me
Wow.
in a gym setting, doing all those movements. So we took over 1,000 reference images for the ones that are in the book.
Hmm.
Um, and then all those were categorized and organized and labeled, and they were all from different angles and different parts of the movement. And then the illustrators took those and rendered those into computer generated images, into
Hmm.
CGI images,
Wow.
and then we basically went through the stages of each part of the lift, and I went through the anatomy, which what muscles are working here under load, which muscles are kind of in an isometric under load, which ones are not under load, all of those things. And that's where you
Yeah.
kind of see the color distinctions happening.
Yeah.
And that process took a long time that was a very tedious part of the
Yes.
book.
I mean, the body is a very tedious thing, so I can only imagine, like
Yeah.
to the minute detail. I want to circle back a little bit because I mean, you've had a really cool career, right? Especially up to this point. I want to know sort of what was your intro to fitness, right? Before you were like a pro bodybuilder. Like what got you started? Like what was like that catalyst?
So I can't remember the exact age, but my usual answer is around 11 or 12. I think I was
Mhm.
12. Um, I think I was 12 going on 13 if I can remember
We'll call it
that.
12 and a half.
Yeah, I was 12 and how do you say it? 12 and 50 cents, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And so anyways, I got started young. My brother started to take me to the gym, your local YMCA.
Yeah.
I was always there anyways, just shooting baskets and stuff, and playing pickup games and stuff. And my brother, who's 2 years older than I am, 2.5 years older than I am, uh, was starting to get educated and lift weights in the weight room and go through the introductory stages of getting into high school sports. And so we had a really good strength conditioning coach in high school
Mm.
for our school program. And he coached all sports from the strength conditioning realm, which is pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And he was really, really good about teaching the basics, and the base. I mean, so you started with uh, regressions of everything. So, before you could do barbell squats, even with just the bar,
Mm.
you had to do, overhead PVC pipe squat, and then you had to do a
Wow.
front loaded kettlebell goblet squat. And then and then you could put a bar on your back with no load. And then once you're signed off there, you could then start to add a little bit of load.
Mm.
And then every last set you ever did in any workout, so you know, most days of the week,
Yeah.
had to be signed off by him as well. And
Wow.
um, so I mean, he was just looking at so many reps, right? And you were
Hmm.
being critiqued and you were being coached on, hey, good depth there, but let's change up stance here. Let's keep that chest up a little bit more. Let's not let that collapse too much. Stuff like that, right? And
It's amazing.
that kind of runs the gambit across all movements. And so my brother was starting to get that education, and he was starting to teach me because he wanted to go lift. I was already wanting to go to the gym to shoot baskets, but I was starting to get into lifting more. So
Mm.
my mom had bought us some dumbbells at home. I had the perfect push-ups. We had something for
Yeah.
pull-ups. All that stuff was
Oh
coming
yeah,
out.
I had them.
We had a weight bench. Stuff like that, and so my brother and I would go up and kind of lift weights together a little bit at home. And then if we had time to go to the or if we could find a ride, we would go there.
Hmm.
Um, and so, yeah, that's kind of how I got into it around that age and just stuck with it. It really made an imprint on me, and I loved it.
I mean, the fact that you you had a coach who actually took you guys through the regressions and actually looked at your form like that and your
Oh,
and signed
yeah.
off on reps too, like that's insane. It's so much work as we know now, right? But I mean, for me, it was in my high school. I was lucky. My intro to fitness was kind of similar. I had like my strength coach was like my mentor. He was like this 65-year-old man. He was like the economics teacher, but he also had like masters in like nutrition, all these, like he was just a brilliant dude. And luckily he would not, like before football training, he would train me first. So we would do like one-on-one without asking for any money or anything like that. And then I do the football workouts. But I like the football workouts at my school, like it was like fucking chaos because we had like a 80-man football team, right? So it's like
Oh yeah,
really
no.
hard to keep track of like like who needs to regress, who needs to take weight off the bar, right? So like the fact that you had that experience to intro your fitness is amazing. Like that's absolutely amazing.
Yeah, so master's degree and
Yeah.
USA Olympic weightlifting certifications and all of that stuff, man. It was really a blessing, and I didn't realize what a blessing it was until I got older. Like most things
Yeah.
that you're blessed with, you don't really understand how blessed you are
Mm,
with the experience you had until it's gone, or until there's hindsight to be had, right? So I had no idea. I was just
mm.
invested into it and I loved it. Anything having to do with athletics or physical expression, I was
Yeah.
always down for.
Yeah.
Um, and so yeah, that was phenomenal, and it really kind of set the stage for my career, in a
Yeah.
big way.
Can I ask you a question? Because you're very, I can just tell you're a very deep thinker, right? Like you're very like the fact that you're like, yeah, sometimes you gotta look back and look at hindsight, like what you learned from that. When did that, like have you always been a very, I guess, introspective person? Is that something that you had to work on? Is that something that kind of, because of your introverted personality growing up, like how did that come to be?
Yeah, I don't know the origin of that.
12, 12
I
and 3 and 75 cents.
yeah. No, I spent a lot of time by myself when I was
Mhm.
younger. Again, like being having time to myself was important when I was young, right?
Mm,
And it wasn't always video games. It was there's stories of I used to, when I'm probably 5 or 6 or something, or maybe even younger than that, I'm playing with like little marbles, I'm putting them in like I'm setting up a defense and an offense, and I'm running offensive plays where the defense is like setting up all
yeah.
with like marbles on the carpet. And so like just by myself for hours, and that's just what I was doing. And so I think I've always wanted to just be, I don't know the right word for it. It's not, I just heard it. There's like there's a difference between being lonely and then being spending time by yourself and
Yeah.
being more isolated, kind of having that confined time to be to yourself.
Hmm.
And I've always had a lot of that, whether it's through just long hours just sitting and being by myself, or playing sports and being in my head a lot. um but I'm kind of floundering on the answer. I don't really
You're
know,
good. Yeah.
I don't really know the answer to that. I It became more apparent to me when, I think, around college, if I really think about it, and bodybuilding helped a lot with it,
Mm,
because bodybuilding was the first time that I really realized that I have that type of control
mm,
over my physical appearance, the way I physically felt, um, the way I could physically progress towards something, the way my mind responded to that, and the way my confidence responded to that. I played sports since I was very, very young. Um, I started, whether it's basketball, football, or baseball, around between probably 5 and 6 years old. And so, because I started when my brother started, because if my
mhm,
brother's playing, I want to play.
mhm.
And so that's when I started playing sports, and I spent a lot of time, in athletic endeavors and whatever else. But it almost always seemed reactionary. in many
Mhm.
ways. Like I
Yeah.
always just I was expected to play. I think I wanted to play when I was young for sure. Like I really enjoyed it, but looking back, like there was a lot. I don't think there was ever a time of the year where I wasn't playing a sport. And so it's just like
Mhm.
I was always one after another. It was always a
Yep.
practice. It was always tryouts during another season ending. You're trying out for basketball and baseball. Like it's just all this stuff. And
Mhm.
bodybuilding was that first time that I was ever able to, I was done with sports. I was in, I just had my first year at university. And I, during that first year of university, I was able to really discover my academic intelligence, my actual like intellectual capacity to
Mhm.
learn new things and apply myself there. I didn't I didn't really know how to express that. I didn't know how to tap into that.
Mhm.
Again, school was always a reactionary thing. It was always, what do I need to do just to play sports?
Mhm.
And I wasn't too worried about pursuing anything academically necessarily. It was always about sports or something physical. And then when I, when I went to university and didn't play sports, I had to really change that mindset. I had to
Yeah.
prove to that first year of college was it's a huge proving ground to myself and to my family that I could do it. Because I doubted myself a lot academically, and I didn't know how to access that really, or how to progress that forward. And so, but I put all I had into that year, and you know, went from like a C student to an A student, a 4.0 student that year, and then that next year of university, I started bodybuilding during school. And so I was kind of coming off that initial like understanding cause and effect, understanding if I put this much effort into something that I don't know much about, I can learn new things. I can adapt really well. I can do really hard things. I can do challenging things. And I think what that does is it just allows you space, and there's this internal self-talk starts to change,
Mhm.
you know, and I can't recall what that internal self-talk was when I was younger, going through
Mhm.
sports and stuff like that, whether it's through high
Mhm.
school or whatever. Like I don't remember any of that self-talk, but I can remember, I at least have a remembrance of the self-talk, the type of self-talk I had once I tapped into more of myself. And
Mhm.
I went more on the offense rather than the defense. And university was a big part of that. Starting to compete in bodybuilding was a big part of that. um, and learning that I had this sense of control, and I could be more than what I was, and
Mhm.
I didn't have to be in this friend group. I didn't have to continue to drink and use drugs. I didn't have to continue to you know trespass and be put on probation. Like I didn't have to continue down this track that I was on.
Mhm.
And bodybuilding kind of saved that for me. It opened up a new light. Academics opened up a new light for me, and I just had this like locus. There was this locus of control
Mhm.
of, dude, everything is in your hands. If you take full self responsibility, you
Yeah.
take self ownership over exactly what's happening to you,
Mhm.
and you can go anywhere here.
Yeah.
And again, like all those were very reinforcing periods of my life. And I think during that time, all that to say, I think during that time, I started to think more and more deeply about myself. I started to self reflect. I think I became more self aware. Um,
Mhm.
when you long hours studying and long hours in the gym doing cardio and lifting by yourself, it just leaves nothing but space for you to think,
Mhm.
right? Because there's no one there free to talk to. So the
Right.
only person there to talk to is yourself. So like you kind of just start talking to yourself.
Yeah.
And the difference between you and a crazy person is like you kind of keep that internal. You don't say it out loud, right?
Sure.
Um, so it's accepting if we're doing it in our heads, but as soon as you
Yeah.
make it audible, it's people start looking at you
You're
funny.
just
But
crazy. No.
yeah, you're crazy, right? Um, but I think that was a big part of it, man. I think that
Yeah,
was kind of I just walked through memory lane with you a little bit to find that answer, but
I love
I
that.
think that was probably it
Yeah.
during those times.
I like what I was thinking of when you said that you finally took like an offensive approach. I immediately went back to you playing with marbles and setting up an
Oh
offense
yeah.
versus defense, right? I think
Yeah.
that's really cool. So it's been in you, right? I think it's just
Yeah.
I think we're presented with opportunities that allow us to make a choice, right? And you were presented with the opportunity to go down that road of self-reflection, right? And I
Hmm.
think that is what a powerful thing to have at like age 19 to 21, right? Like that's like to be able to be able to sit with yourself, right? I think especially that in modern day culture, I think that is few and far between, right? Where
Hmm.
you have so many things that can take you out of, even if you are by yourself, that can take you out of being with yourself, right? And I think the skill and the habit that you created at such a young age, like to me, there's no doubt that's why you are the person you are today, is because you developed that skill to sit with yourself. Like that, dude, that is so important to sit with
Yeah.
yourself and self-reflect. Like that's amazing. For me, I guess the question I have for you is because you went from this, this persona of a bodybuilder, right? And you went pro, obviously. What was the moment like where you were ready to sort of shed that skin and face the next part of your or the next chapter of your life?
Yeah. The the skin was starting to itch, and I could tell it was ready to start to shed.
Mm,
Um, Around would have been 2000 and I forget the year, maybe 2015, midway through there. Um, so I had competed a couple times as a pro up to that point, and I didn't really know if I wanted to keep going. So, and also I kind of ran away from, I was trying to find a way out, I
mm,
think, in a lot of ways. And so, I was in the third year of university. I had the professional competing career. I was known around town as that person. No matter what gym I went to, there was always people that kind of knew you and would want to talk and just kind of talk about that. And again, which is great and exciting, and very grateful for that, and all of those things. But yeah, you can kind of see this in my career over time as well. But
mhm.
and we may get there, but it's like once I'd achieved that thing and kind of like scratch that itch, I was sort of
Mhm.
ready for another challenge and ready for something new. I don't have There's a theme in my life that I've realized recently, especially professionally, is like I don't ever get too comfortable in any one thing. I really kind of hop
Mm,
around and kind of always searching for a new challenge.
mhm.
And so I think that was a big part of wanting to kind of run away from a life I had created, and I wasn't connected quite as much to the competing anymore, or at least needed a break. And so what I did was I was like, well, I'm either going to quit school. Like that was a good answer.
Wow.
I was just overwhelmed,
Yeah.
and I wasn't really in my third year of university. I was deep into the dietetics school of dietetics. Um, I wasn't really getting along with my professors. We weren't on the same page. It was a clinical program. It was a nursing school I went to, and it was a very clinically driven program. And I was more interested in the sports dietetics aspect of
Mhm.
things, and I just couldn't get away from talking about tube feedings and
Mm.
special populations and CCU care for people
Right.
on. It's just like, dude, I don't care like at all, and I can't seem to get myself out of this and there also, I think in the program there was maybe like four professors,
Mm.
and it's just like, dude, I don't get along with I'm just not on the same page as any of you guys. And
Right.
they weren't interested in having discourse over how this applied in different aspects. Because I also, again, I was a professional bodybuilder by this point. So like
Right.
I had extensive experience with manipulation through nutrition and
Mm-hmm.
using the science of diet, what I was learning in class to pursue that, right, at a high level. And they just weren't that interested in playing around with those ideas necessarily. And I didn't connect to it. And so I'm quite avoidant person. And so I wanted to avoid that. And I wanted to get out of there.
Mm.
And I was like, well, I'll, I'll quit school. And I was like, well, that's not a good idea. Maybe instead I'll kind of do what's in the middle of that and I'll study abroad without any goal in mind. I just want to leave the country. I just want to leave. I want to
Mm.
kind of run away from this life that I've kind of found myself in. And so I applied to a university abroad in England and got in, and I went abroad. I spent that next semester in England, and I didn't think much about bodybuilding. Yeah, I maybe trained. I went from probably training five or six, probably between 6 and 12 sessions a week, right? So a lot of days I was training twice a day
Wow.
to maybe training 3 times per week, maybe twice,
Wow.
maybe twice. I played pickup basketball at the school. I was traveling around on the weekends. I spent time in like 12 different countries while I was there.
Mm-hmm.
I just explored, and I immersed myself in this new kind of what is this new person I could be? Like, who do I want to be? Because no one knows me here.
Mm-hmm.
No, I didn't know, like only one person knew who I was, who I grew up with, which was it was a happenstance that he was there too. I had no idea he was even going to be there, but
Mm-hmm.
um, and so it was nice to have a partner to travel Europe with. But we hadn't been close in years. Like we basically spent our most of our college years separated. So we kind of became different people and came back together, and we're kind of learning who the new versions of those people are,
Mm-hmm.
the more grown up versions of those people. And so it was great to kind of go somewhere that no one knew me and I could
Yeah.
kind of try to fit into this new version of who I thought I wanted to be and how I wanted to show up in the world and what was more important to me at that time versus just trying to put on another inch on my arms and,
Mm.
you know, stay away from using PEDs and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
I just like, there's so much stuff that I just didn't want to think about anymore. And so, and then I met who's now my wife there.
Wow.
Um, I traveled around Europe during that time, and that's that was me shedding my skin. I think,
Mm-hmm.
that was the period where that itch, right? I could tell it wanted to shed, and so
Yeah.
I was like, I gotta bail. I'm shedding the skin. I'm leaving the country. I'd
Yeah.
never been out of the country up to this point either, so it's like
That's cool.
I just jumped. I was like, I don't, and I remember telling my mom, and she was just like, she kind of laughed it off. She was like, I just don't think I don't think that's what you're gonna do.
Well,
Like, I
she
support
challenged you.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, the most supportive person. My
Yeah.
family's the most supportive people I
Right.
could ever ask for. And very grateful for that. I even teared up this morning thinking about that. Like, I'm so grateful for them
Yeah.
in so many ways. And like almost to a degree where I feel guilty that like some things haven't gone differently because just how supportive they have been.
Mm-hmm.
And I know they would kick me for even saying that. But
Yeah.
um and again, like I'm working on that. But
Sure.
anyways, she kind of like, they kind of laughed it off and they're like, I understand you're stressed or you're anxious, you're something, but like I just don't really think that's true. And when I got in, I was like, hey, I got in. I leave in 2 months or I leave in a month. It was like pretty soon.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's 2 months because I kind of had a couple months to get my passport. I had a couple months to like figure
Mm-hmm.
out the travel and stuff like that. And there was just kind of like the surreal moment of like, oh, you're serious? Like you're going. And I was like,
Right.
yeah, I'm going. Like
This is
I'm
happening.
tired. This is literally happening. So um and so like everyone got on the program after that. But
Cool.
and that was me shedding my skin, man. And
Yeah.
it was wonderful. I found out so much more about the world. I
Mm.
found out so much more about myself. And I think it really made me such a better human being and such a more
Mm-hmm.
well-rounded and empathetic and compassionate person.
Mm-hmm.
Spending time in so many different cultures while I was over there, or different countries and places I had no idea what the language even was. And I was
Mm-hmm.
just like, I guess we'll just figure it out, man. And
Yeah.
we'll be in an uncomfortable situation,
Yeah.
and get through it. But that was me shedding my skin.
I love that. And I think it was interesting because you used the word avoidant. You were like, I was avoiding this program, this dietetic program, this clinical program. But the way I see it, like to reframe it, is like you were just searching for alignment, right? Like that's
Yeah.
to me, like that's your whole journey. It was just like you sensed, you knew, you had that intuitive feeling. You were just like, this is not for me. I feel very out of alignment. I don't feel like I'm around the right audience that is supporting my intuitive growth that I'm trying to seek. And you literally and think about everything that came from that, right? That your
Oh
search for
yeah.
alignment, right? The fact that you met your future wife while you were out there, the fact that you were able to have all these cultures, the fact that you also changed your or you challenged your parents' view of the current version of you, right? Because they at that time they were reflecting on the person they perceived you to be, right? Which was like, Austin, you're not gonna fucking leave the country. There's no chance. Like we know you, buddy. Like you're
Yeah.
Mr. Marbles. Like there's no
Yeah.
way. Go to your room, right? So it's
Mr.
like,
Marvels. I like
yeah,
that.
it's so it's like at this point, it's like that was probably that might be a huge moment for you where you challenge not only your own belief but everyone else's perception of you, right? And that allowed you to grow and find this new alignment, right? I think that alone, like that's cool to reflect on. That's really amazing. I love that.
Yeah, I appreciate you pulling that out. Yeah, that does make a lot more sense that I was kind of searching that I was more searching for alignment. And I think that's a lot of the sharp right turns that I've taken
Mm,
throughout my life. Professionally, especially, I've taken
mm-hmm,
some right turns that probably didn't make a lot of sense when I made them.
mm-hmm.
Um, but again, like I think you're right. Like I just have spent so much time just searching for alignment. And there's been times where I feel somewhat aligned, but it's sort of like the end of Inception where there's kind of
Yeah.
that wobble,
Yeah, yeah.
and I'm still not sure if that was a dream. So,
Right.
um, but it kind of like, you're kind of on course, but there's enough wobbles where you're like, I can't feel settled here. I just don't feel like this is even it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's how I found myself in so many different situations,
Yeah.
professionally, especially, but personally, even now. But yeah, I mean, I'm so grateful that I just kind of listened to whatever that gut feeling was and wasn't scared. I
Yeah.
just or did it in spite of being scared.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think anytime you lean into that unknown, that uncertainty without expectations, right? It didn't sound like you had any expectations about going abroad. It didn't sound like you were just kind of like see what happens, right? And I
Oh, I
think
had zero
yeah,
expectations.
right.
I didn't even care if I got credits. I just needed, I knew that was the most productive way to run away for
Mm-hmm.
at least a period of time,
Mm-hmm.
to get a new, refreshed, maybe perspective on what I needed to do, or
Mm-hmm.
maybe some answers on what my future held, or
Mm-hmm.
if I even wanted to continue on and just finish my degree or not,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I'm glad I did. But I think that was really the kind of the sole mission of that. And again, just to meet new people,
Mm-hmm.
to go somewhere that no one knew me,
Yeah.
and to find who I was then, and who I kind of have those moments where, right, you have this and you have a picture of who you want to be,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's this version of who you want to be, and then there's the version of who you are. It's the being and becoming.
Mm-hmm.
And you're trying to do your best with coping with who you are, and being good with that, but also never kind of stop that pursuit of becoming who you always know you could be. And I wasn't I think at that time I just wasn't very satisfied. Like, I
Mhm.
didn't, I wasn't in alignment with who I wanted to be. Who I
Mhm.
wasn't in alignment. And I really kind of I felt that urge. I felt that need to just sprint towards who that
Mhm.
to find out who that was and
Mhm.
what the possibilities held there.
Mhm.
And again, I'm glad that I did.
Yeah. I think that is such a that's like one of the big questions of life, right? I think, I think it's a lot of anybody listening to can probably relate to that where it's you're trying we're trying to find peace in the moment, right? Like we're trying to find that feeling of contentment in the now, right? Because as we all know, like if you spend too much time in the past, spend too much time in the future, you're missing out like what's right in front of you, right? But then at the same time, you have this you have this want or this knowing that I'm trying to be a certain type of person, whether that is financially, whether that is spiritually, whether that is mentally, emotionally, right? Whether it's a better father, whether it's a better son, right? Maybe it's getting into a more meditative place, right? You're trying to also at the same time while trying to be present to to create change. And I think that's like the tightrope of life, right? Where it's like you're really just trying to not fall to either side, but get to the other side, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's like immediately what I thought of when you said that. And it's ironic because I know so many, at least people in our industry, because that's what I'm more familiar with, who fight that or navigate that, right? I think our buddy Jared, I know for sure. Like I'll definitely send him this clip because he's one of those people I think of immediately who's, you know, always has big aspirations and growth and change, but also like we said, like if you're missing out on this moment right now, then this is life right now, right? Like this moment is us living. So it is a delicate balance of trying to weave through that. Um, the the question I have for you is because you've had a really cool journey in terms of like your how your own fitness has evolved, right? Like the tightrope of your own fitness journey and I'm sure your programming and all that stuff. Your presentation at the Real Coaches Summit, I really think resonate with me the most because it was the most real yet most simple way to understand program design for anybody, whether you're brand new to the gym or whether you're a seasoned veteran. Can you touch on? I know we don't have as much time, and I do have one more question after this. So this is me challenging you to give
Yeah.
a concise answer, I guess. But can you give a little bit of tangible advice to someone who's either just starting in the gym or has an experienced person of what some simple guidelines they can strive for while they're in the gym to see some sort of progression?
Yeah. I like to take a joint centric approach. And this is kind of what I presented on
Mm-hmm.
in a large way. And so I think the easiest way to think about designing a program for yourself or for anyone is to understand what those main joints are, right? So, we have the elbow and the shoulder, we have the hip and the knee as our main joints, right? Obviously, there's a lot more joints than that. Spoiler alert. But those are the main ones that we really need to concern ourselves with. And then we have our generally we have our torso that we want to flex, extend, and rotate to some degree,
Mm-hmm.
which is that houses our core. What we reference as core training or whatever. And so understanding what those joints do is important. So the elbow flexes and extends. The shoulder does a lot of different things, just like the hip does. And then the knee does what the elbow does in a large way. And so let's find movements that kind of take those joints through what they do and challenge them there and work hard there. And can we choose an exercise that challenges either one or multiple of those joints, right? That we so think about rows and presses and stuff like that, like a bench press or shoulder press or at some type of seated row or pull down or anything like that. Those challenge both the elbow and the shoulder. So
Mm,
that's kind of what you get a compound exercise, multi-joint, bang for your, big bang for your buck.
mm,
So you can do a lot of work there and you can challenge the tissues around both of those joints at once, which is really great. And so understanding those just basic principles is important, I think. And as long as you're hitting basic movement patterns of pushing and pulling, both with the upper and lower body. So you think about squatting and hinging with the lower body. You think about pushing and pulling in different planes of motion, so both vertically and horizontally with the upper body.
mm,
And then you think about some form of rotation and flexion and extension of your torso to help train your core and the muscles that help protect your spine.
mm,
And you do that, a couple times a week at least, and you're in a really good spot.
mm,
Um, challenge yourself when you're in there, when you're training. You should train to the point where reps start to slow down a little bit. And you get tired, but you're not just tired. You're tired, and the reps start to slow down a little bit, right?
mm, yeah.
Because getting tired doesn't mean your reps are slowing down.
Right.
And the reps slowing down is the important. The caveat there is what we seem to know now, or a little bit more about, is the importance of reaching a certain threshold of training stress or training stimulus to elicit adaptations, especially towards building muscle, which adaptively is a very beneficial thing to do. Not only aesthetically but from a health perspective too, because those muscles become very powerful endocrine organs that help regulate and crosstalk between all other systems, your immune system,
Mm,
your nervous system, your endocrine system, and they're also a massive reservoir for uh, nutrients, blood
mm,
sugars and fats and things like that help counter against things like diabetes and cardiovascular disease and all of these preventable diseases that unfortunately kill so many every year that are preventable. And so building muscle and strength building muscle allows us to really reduce that,
mm,
as well as having a massive positive impact on our brain health and cognitive abilities, especially as we age. Um, but also, building muscle and strength and retaining, some form of mobility throughout our life as well allows us to continue to be physically independent as we age,
mm,
which, there's some pretty horrifying statistics around falls.
mhm,
Um, so, I mean, I'll misquote it, but just to kind of give you an idea, it's somewhere around like, people around the age of 65, like 50% who experience a fall and a fracture of their, I think it was like their femur or something like that, something around the hip. Like 50% of those, I think, to they don't live to see another 12 months after that.
wow.
And the other 50% basically are left with kind of never returning to their past self. Like you're always
Mm,
kind of left with that for the rest, your remaining
right.
years. And again, like don't quote me on those exact statistics, but
Mhm,
I don't think I'm too far off from what those statistics truly say. And so
mhm,
again, the point isn't to be a stickler on statistics. The point is to sort of create a picture and a true story of what can happen if we don't take care of ourselves,
mhm,
both physically and mentally and emotionally and spiritually and socially and all of these things, where we find ourselves in these positions where the moment where we finally get to the point where, you know, we can retire and we can finally live our life the way we always wanted it to. But unfortunately, we don't have the physical capacity to do it,
mm,
right? We're sort of trapped,
yeah.
right? You have time, you may have some money at least to not have to work or work a lot. Um, you finally get to travel, you finally get to spend time with grandkids or kids, and so much of that is taken away by the lack of physical ability that you
Mm,
have at that point in your life because you haven't, again, kind of what we started with, like with VO2 max, for example, it's sort of this representation of the work you've been doing up to that point, right? And that's when you see someone who's in their 50s or 60s or 70s, they likely, that's a representation of the work that's been done for decades leading into that moment. Um, and they truly get to experience life at that time.
mhm,
And if we get to make it there, I think we should do all that we can to prepare for it,
mhm.
to be able to live life to the fullest in those moments.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
hopefully that was a helpful answer as far as like setting up a program. So choose
Yeah.
joints, understand the main joints, choose exercises that train those joints, train them hard.
Hmm.
Um, somewhere between 6 and 20 reps
Hmm.
for a few sets, probably a good place to be for each one of those. And if you're only training twice a week, try to train your whole body every time you go.
Hmm.
If you're training, 4 or 5 times a week, you can split that up a little bit more.
Hmm.
Um, if you're training 4 times a week, I like to split it up into half your body at once. Think about upper body workouts and lower body
Right.
workouts. Do a couple of each week. But if you're going 1 to 3 times per week, I think just training your whole body every time you go is a great idea.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, like I said, I like how not only you can give that practical advice, but then apply it to the importance of making these 6 to 20 rep investments over a period of your lifetime to help you be as independent as possible, right? Like to
Yeah.
be able to get off a toilet seat, to, play golf, to be able to not worry about balance or not worry as much about balance and stability as we get older, right? As I think bone density, right? I think those actual applications from training, I think is incredibly important. I think often gets overlooked because so many are consumed about their pants fitting a certain way, right? When
Yeah.
our real concern should be how can I be as independent as possible for as long as I live while living a quality life. And because your genes are going to change regardless, right? I think that's
Oh
that's
yeah,
the
dude.
that's the most important part. My final question for you is, so we're going another 180 again. So it's funny because we touched on you had mentioned like some moments in your life. And the irony is that the name of this podcast is called These Little Moments Podcast. And the reason I named it that is because I went to one of our mutual friends, Jordan Syatt's seminar once, and everybody was being very vulnerable and sharing like their, whether it's binge eating, whether it was struggles with weight or anything like that. And my gut was telling me to speak. And I spoke to this crowd of 50, 70 people, and I basically just shared for the first time my own struggles with mental health, anxiety, depression that, I was battling over the years and finally faced. And that was a big catalyst for me to begin my self-reflection journey and to start focusing on something other than bench press and focus more on my feelings and all that. So to bounce that question off for you, besides the moment we talked about that was pretty pivotal for you, is there another little moment in your life that sticks out that you believe has led you to become the person you are sitting in this chair today?
Hmm. I don't know if there's an exact moment. I
Hmm.
think that I can at least reflect on it at this time.
Sure.
But I do think there's just been so many little moments that have allowed me to kind of course correct or pivot.
Mm,
Um, it's sort of this, whether you're looking at whether it's nautical or something that's in the air, right? So if you like planes and boats and stuff, like a difference of a degree or two over a certain distance makes a massive difference in the final destination of where you end
Mm,
up, right?
mhm,
And these tiny adjustments of this dial, I think, is huge, and allowing yourself to make mistakes and allowing yourself to then reflect on those mistakes, or opportunities to learn from those moments, and understanding that you're not stuck where you are, and you have the control to change things, even if it's 1 degree, right? Because
mhm.
even 1 degree takes you to a different place
Right,
5, 10, 20 years from now, even a year from now, even 6 months from now, depending on how much of that dial you turn up or down.
right.
And so don't I think it's just a lot of those moments where there's a lot of adjusting, and a lot of self-reflection, a lot of kind of these gut check moments of really looking at myself in the mirror of, is this who you want to be? Is this who you are? Um, what is important to you? You know,
Mhm,
um, and it is a lot of those small conversations, with myself, just that happen over whether it's days, weeks, months, years, and being able to listen to those and to adjust and to course correct a little bit each time.
mhm,
Sometimes making drastic changes or drastic right turns, as I mentioned earlier.
mhm.
But yeah, I don't think there's one in particular moment that sticks out, so much, but definitely a bunch of small moments that have led me to this point, and allowing space for that change to happen, I think, is
Mhm.
huge. Um, but understanding that it's always up to you.
Yeah, I love that, man. And just want to say I'm very grateful for this conversation. I had no intention about where we were going to, no expectations where we were going to go with it, and I'm glad
Yeah,
where it went because it was very vulnerable. I very much appreciate these deep and vulnerable conversations and learning more about you. And besides your amazing brain with programming and fitness, for me, it's always like, well,
yeah,
what else is there, right?
yeah.
So I appreciate you. Little round of applause for the man, Mr. Marbles. He's the best. So where can
Mr. Marvelous.
where can people find you?
I hang out on Instagram quite a bit, more than I should. Um, so just Austin Current on Instagram. I'm the bearded guy. It's a yellow background of the photo, or on the photo. So yellow background with a beard. That's me. Um, and then yeah, you can, if you're interested in strength training, think about grabbing my book. It's twelve
Yes,
dollars,
definitely
so
grab the
it's not
book.
gonna break the bank. But just go on Amazon and type in science of strength training, or type in strength training book or weight training book, and it should pop up.
That's amazing. Well, I appreciate you, buddy. You're the man. Thank you so much. We'll hang out for a second just to chat for a little bit. But Austin Current, appreciate you, buddy. And we'll see you guys in the next episode. Later.